So if I live in Eastern Kentucky and I am unemployed, why am I more privileged than you? And why am I in any way, as you put it, responsible for problems of people I've never met on the other side of the country?
Look, I mean, we know that larger forces provide people opportunities or disadvantages. When you come, many people say, let me even stretch it even further. Some people say, look, I came to this country 20 years ago. I came to this country 30 years ago. I wasn't advantaged directly by the system of enslavement that prevailed in America. But if you come to this country as an immigrant and you're a white immigrant and you inherit certain privileges associated with people who are already here, that means that privilege extends to you regardless of the fact that you indirectly benefited from it and you did not directly contribute to inequality. The Constitution was written a long time ago, so was the Declaration of Independence. But those ancient documents continue to inform people's lives and shape their aspirations.
Well, Georgetown sociology professor Michael Eric Dyson has a solution to white privilege. He says white Americans ought to create individual reparations accounts to compensate black Americans for centuries of oppression. Professor Dyson joins us now to explain how that would work and why. Professor, great to see you.
Good to see you, my friend.
So how would this work and why?
Well, yeah. Well, it's in the context, let me just briefly say, it's in the context of a much broader discussion about white privilege, white innocence, white American identity, and it's much more complicated than that, and I go at African American culture's contradictions as well. And then in the end, when I'm making suggestions about what can be done, many white people approach me and ask me, what can I do? Not in terms of the broad social transformation out there in the world. We all believe in that or argue about it, redistribution of resources or not. But when people ask me, what can I as an individual do? One of the things I suggested, besides being educated, besides participating with other African American and Latino and other brothers and sisters in social movement, is to do something called an individual repair of inequality. And if they feel inclined to do so, this is for people who are so inclined to seek out a way to compensate individually for.
No. That is the most ridiculous thing ever. So some random white person, let me see if I get this straight. Some random white person is supposed to individually pay some random black person who claims to be a victim or a descendant of slaves money. And then that random black person will suddenly decide, you know what? I've been cleared. I'm cleansed of my disdain and hatred and grievance. That's supposed to fix it? Random white people giving random blacks money is supposed to make them stop with the grievances. That sounds like some sadomasochist type dynamic going on there. So, like someone who likes to punish others and someone who likes to get punished. Anyone who would engage in that dynamic, you're sick. You're a weakling.
What they think is a systemic injustice. So I talked about buying kids computers, being able to take kids to school, to tutor them, to be able to do individual things that are tailored to their desires and aspirations, such as becoming professionals, exposing them to things they wouldn't ordinarily see. So in other words, it's a kind of ethic of compassion joined to a sense of conscience that motivates them to do what they're motivated to do.
Well, so I support a lot of that. I mean, I believe in charity. What I don't believe in is collective guilt. And that's why I'm confused by the phrase white privilege.
Well, white privilege doesn't suggest guilt, it suggests responsibility and accountability. The same accountability that America talks to about people pulling up themselves by their bootstraps and addressing their situations, their communities as being responsible for doing what they're doing. I don't believe in collective guilt, but I do believe in collective responsibility.
Responsibility and guilt are synonyms in this case. And let me just ask, let's be specific. So,
what's the responsibility? Here we go again with this responsibility talk. What responsibility? What collective responsibility? So if some random white immigrates into this country from Czechoslovakia, he needs to have some collective guilt over what happened years ago in this country?
Privilege. I'm privileged, and I wouldn't deny that, not because I'm white, because I have a good paying job. But you're privileged too.
Of course.
So we live near each other in a nice neighborhood. You're rich. You went to an Ivy League school, unlike me. And so you're way more privileged than most white Americans.
Well,
so why would they owe
But it's
you
not
something?
first of all, privilege is contingent upon the context in which it's defined. So individual cases could have an imbalance, that people of color could be way more privileged, as you talked about, than the average, say, white person. But remember, during Jim Crow, Jackie Robinson was more privileged than most white people in terms of having the ability to make a good living on a job, but he was still denied access to a water fountain. His kids still couldn't go to the same school. So I'm saying to you that your argument then seems to be rather vulnerable to rebuff, because it doesn't mean economic accumulation can prevent you from experiencing what are essentially racial inequalities. So the amount of money you have doesn't do that.
Yeah, and in 1955, I think that was much truer than it is now.
Well, even now, when we talk about the disparities in terms of people's achievement, a study was done by Diva Pager at Princeton University that said a black person with a college education had less of a chance to get a job than a white person who had gone to prison. So even now,
yeah, these studies, I have to see the one he's talking about, because most of the ones I've seen, and I've seen a few of them, the methodology is ridiculous. How they arrive at, oh, there was race-based discrimination is, oh, different outcomes, different callback rates, interviewing black people about whether or not they feel they've been discriminated against. To put it simply, there's no conclusive proof that there's race-based discrimination. They're just using some ridiculous standard that, oh, if there's different outcomes between blacks and whites, it must be because of racism. But it's important to look at the methodology and how they arrive at these conclusions in these studies. Because if you just read the paper, you'll see that sometimes the standards for what actual discrimination is and what they're searching for can be a little bit loose. And there's this weird pattern where these guys will produce research that supports and validates their ideological agendas, and then they'll reference each other to build upon this ridiculous house of cards.
I'm not talking about 50 years ago. I'm talking about this is going on right now. The disparities are very real.
Right. So if I live in Eastern Kentucky and I am unemployed, why am I more privileged than you? And why am I in any way, as you put it, responsible for problems of people I've never met on the other side of the country?
Look, I mean, we know that larger forces provide people opportunities or disadvantages. When you come, many people say, let me even stretch it even further. Some people say, look, I came to this country 20 years ago. I came to this country 30 years ago. I wasn't advantaged directly by the system of enslavement that prevailed in America. But if you come to this country as an immigrant and you're a white immigrant and you inherit certain privileges associated with people who were already here, that means that privilege extends to you regardless of the fact that you indirectly benefited from it and you did not directly contribute to inequality. The Constitution was written a long time ago, so was the Declaration of Independence. But those ancient documents continue to inform people's lives and shape their aspirations.
So let me flip it around. And let me just also note there's a lot of hostility in what you're saying. And I'm sure you'll say there isn't, but obviously there is.
Not at all.
I think it's pretty clear.
It's recognition of the situation.
Okay.
It's pushback on whiteness that is usually not called out.
Clearly hostile. But leaving that aside, I'll flip around for a second. If I'm an African immigrant who comes here, I'm resettled from Somalia at public expense, high public expense. Am I due these reparations too?
I think that the people who have benefited from systemic inequity in this country have been overwhelmingly white brothers and sisters. And what I'm talking about is a direct relationship to a notable and a documentable and an empirically verifiable system of inequality. There's nothing that's very obscure about that. And I'm saying to you that people of color who are here now, who have inherited that legacy as a result of their black skin and their relationship to black culture, have to be acknowledged.
Well, wait,
my book is not simply about reparations.
He didn't answer the question. Should some random Somalian get their reparation bucks from some random white Czechoslovakian who came to America like 20 years ago? Both of them have nothing to do with anything that took place in America historically, but they're going to create this dynamic where one is paying the other. Should that happen?
I
know that it's not, but it's heavily about privilege. But let me just, we're almost out of time.
It's about white refusal to acknowledge
responsibility. If a majority white country brings in a black African at its own expense, They still owe him reparations for slavery?
No, I'm talking about the people who are here. That's an isolated event. I'm talking about the majority of African American people who are here, who are part and parcel of what this country has been, and who have built it in its institutions to become what it is now.
If you want to know more about this argument, you can read this book.
Yeah, this guy is, very painful to listen to this guy. Very painful. This guy is an example of these people who go around with their victim narrative and their grievance dealers. They sell grievances to people who are looking for some scapegoats for their lack of agency in their life, for their lack of success, accomplishment. This guy will give you the grievances that you need. He will allow you to point. He will direct you at who you should be pointing your finger at. That's his role. He's very skilled at creating the victim narrative. But anyways, that's the video. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Peace.